I've made videos talking about the various themes that we've had at the heart of Bridgerton season 4, whether it's the call for the characters to remember their place, which cuts across both the main story that is Benefits all the way to the subplots that feature Araminta and Sophie, Queen Charlotte and Lady Danbury, etc. And there was also the theme of the loss and gain that is a part of one's living experience, but there is one theme that stood out for me as well. The very moment that a certain conversation happened with Penelope, and that is the theme of the shifting of the blame, because I find it a very interesting premise to consider, especially when we look at the world in which Bridgerton is set, how inherently unfair it is and how human the characters are and behave, whereby rather than actually direct their ire at the systems that are responsible for their lot, they choose instead to shift the blame. It's fascinating how consistent it is across board for these characters, don't you think? Of course, before I start yapping on about blames and the shifting thereof, I would like to say a big thank you to my lovely patrons and YouTube members whose support have been instrumental in helping me continue to make content, especially since I started doing this full time at the start of last year, which was the last time I was in paid employment. And a special shout out to Lena, Sherry, and Holly for their extra support. You get all the hearts and kisses to if you too would like to support me on Patreon or become a YouTube member to enjoy certain perks, maybe even get a shout out, the link to do so is in the description bar. And with that said, like I stated at the start of the video, it was a certain conversation featuring Penelope that had me immediately thinking of this theme. And the minute it clicked for me, I started seeing it everywhere else as being a prominent part of the story that was being told in the season. After Penelope decides to return to the roots of sharing the scandalous gossip that was passed on to her, she writes an issue about the age old practice that certain gentlemen of the ton engage in, the maintenance of a mistress. In this case, Mr. Hiscox, who happens to be on somewhat friendly terms with Benedict. Sorry, am I the only one who always draws the line between people I actually consider my friends, who are few in number, and people I'm friendly with but don't count as friends for me, who are more substantial? Because that was how I read Benedict's relationship with Hiscox. Please tell me I am not the only one. Anyway, as I was saying, Penelope writes her issue about Mr. Hiscox and the inappropriateness of his behavior, where he has chosen to somewhat openly flaunt the fact that he has recently acquired a mistress to the humiliation of his wife, who might have otherwise pretended to be in the dark about the affair, and everyone around her would have aligned with her in the farce, because as long as it's an open secret, it's still considered a secret nonetheless. Penelope's whistle down issue, on the other hand, tore through the paper thin veneer of respectability that she had up to blind herself to her husband's shenanigans, which now that it's in the open and has turned into such public ridicule with no more pretense employed, means that Hiscus has no choice but to end the affair with his mistress, Miss Virginia. Virginia, who then shows up to Penelope's house to berate her for openly revealing said secret and blames her for having ruined her life. Now, I know a lot of people's takeaway from that scene is the fact that with the revelation of Penelope's identity as Lady Whistledown, her anonymity can no longer protect her from the members of the ton who have objections about what she's written. And to be fair, that is true and that is the case. But at the same time, I found the moment very interesting in how it plays with the shifting of blame, because on one hand, you have Virginia who insists that she could have carried on with her affair with Mr. Iscos. He would have set her up well, and nobody else would have been any wiser if only Penelope Featherington, now Bridgerton, had kept her mouth shut. Penn, on the other hand, shifts the blame to Virginia and Escox as well. Can she be held responsible for penning something that is basically an open secret at this point? If Virginia's desire all this while has been to maintain her status as a mistress and save up for the good times before she ages out of her profession and Escox decides to abandon her for someone younger, a situation that, based off of her conversation with Penelope, she was already anticipating and planning towards, then the onus was on Virginia and Iscox to have been more discreet with their affairs. Just because no one had said anything doesn't mean everyone does not know everything about their relationship. And like I said, the back and forth with the shifting of blame for these two women was so entertaining to me because neither one of them end up admitting who actually is the one responsible for the situation. Society at large. When we are first introduced to Miss Virginia, it isn't when the lady whistle down issue spreads and she runs into Mr. and Mrs. Iscox with the judgmental eye of the entire town and flees from them. Nope, our first meeting of Virginia is in Benedict Bridgerton's bed. She is one of the women who is with when Violet shows up to drag her son out of the arms of said women that he had had an orgy with the previous night, and she brings him back into respectable society. Hell, it is Virginia who is surprised when Benedict introduces Violet as his mother in that particular scene. The next time we hear of her is when Iscox is telling Benedict of him being in love with her, which I found fascinating because, like, there is not a hint, a smidgen of recognition in Benedict's eyes at this point. Virginia was just one of the many faceless people he had sex with before he met Sophie, and that for me was just a bit sad. Because whilst Miss Virginia gets to blame Penelope for her secret getting loose, she can only do that because she isn't able to actually blame and confront their society itself for limiting her options for work and sustenance and forcing her into the situation where she has to lean on and depend on a man for her survival. Theirs is a world that is unkind to women who get to interact with members of the landed gentry, but who aren't themselves noble women. And before anyone mentions Genevieve Delacroix, please remember what Marina said in her efforts to blackmail her. Even Madame Delacroix is existing amongst the ton with a false identity. That's what she has to do to be able to support herself. And of course, we remember Sienna and her having to find herself a new patron when she realizes that Anthony can't be in the cards for her. Rather than will on a system that has always treated her as disposable whilst limiting her options or turning the blame on the man who was so careless with her and his supposed love for her that he didn't treat her with the respect that is warranted, a secret that deserves to be protected, she instead shifts the blame to Penelope. The same can be said to apply to Araminta and Sophie. Like I mentioned in my video where I pointed out that the true villain, to me at least, is Lord Gunn, because, and I know a lot of you all disagree with me on that, but that is fine. I still, however, stand by it because based off of the time period, it could and should have done more to protect Sophie's interest as her father, who is very well aware that his new wife doesn't actually like his illegitimate daughter. With how unfair their society is, having everything be based on Araminta's goodwill was him being delusional as fuck. I have zero expectations about because the one person who is actually Sophie's parent and to whom falls the responsibility of ensuring that she's properly cared for is Lord Gunn. A note to his lawyer to pursue things and ensure that his will is being executed exactly as he wants it to be would have saved Sophie so much hurt. But sorry, I digress. As I was saying, with Araminta, just like with Miss Virginia, she shifts her blame on Sophie, the innocent party in the entire mess, because she is incapable of blaming their society, which, just like with Virginia, is the one responsible for the situation in which she finds herself. The fact that it's so deeply patriarchal that her own worth is tied either to her husband or her son, which meant that her first marriage that had her widowed, even though she already had two children, she was still tossed out into the cold because those kids were girls. We had an entire sequence of events with Portia Featherington, who scraped and fought and schemed and lied her way into being able to secure the Featherington household and title for her and her girls. But I think it's important to note that the reason why Portia was able to be fairly successful in her plans is because her daughters were grown at that point, two of whom were married, and so all she had to do was bank on there being a male heir. Araminta Gunn did not have that luxury with two young girls who are dependent on her for their survival. And now she has to be back on the marriage mat as a widow, which means her choices are so much more narrowed and she has to fight a uphill battle. And here comes Lord Gunn, charming, sweeps her off her feet. She thinks, oh, yes, this is great, marries him, brings her girls over. And that is when he drops his illegitimate daughter on her and also insists that said girl is to be raised with her daughters. Something that is also scandalous for their society as it would cast aspersions on her daughter's honor to have been raised and trained alongside, pardon my French on this, a bastard. Now, before anyone comes crucifying me, like I said in my Araminta video, this is not me saying that what she did was justified or right. No, it was not. What I'm saying, though, is that she fits perfectly well in the theme of misplaced blame because her powerlessness and the fact that she cannot lash out at their societal system that literally have her trapped in the situation that she's in, and the fact that she also cannot lash out at the man who waited until he had married her, kept her in the dark about something as important as having an illegitimate child, and only hit her with the truth when she had married him and was effectively trapped in a marriage with him. Considering the fact that she could not lash out at either of these two entities, she instead chose to push the blame on Sophie. Is it right? No. Does it fit with the theme of the shifting of blame that is central to the season? Yes, it does. And the same can be said to apply to Queen Charlotte as well and her initial reaction, both to Penelope making her first request to rest her pen and walk away from her days as Lady Whistledown, and Lady Danbury's desire to travel back to her home country. Queen Charlotte is consistent with her anger, lashing out at Penelope for what she considers disrespect on her part. Remember, the reason why Penn's reveal in season 3 as Lady Whistledown went as seamlessly as it did and she wasn't torn apart by the entire ton at the time was because of Queen Charlotte openly acknowledging her and her work and subtly giving her the approval to continue with said work. So that is what Queen Charlotte is thinking about when she lashes out at what she considers ingratitude on Penelope's part, blaming her for caving in and not wanting to do the work when they had a deal and Penn had just one job. And it's the same thought process that has her upset at the thought of Lady Danbury leaving her. She blames her for what she considers abandonment on Lady Danbury's part. But unlike with Araminta and Virginia, through Penelope, the story is able to show Queen Charlotte what is truly at the driving force of all her anger, what she's actually pissed at, why she's reacting the way she is and blaming everyone for not sticking with the status quo, whether it is Penn or Lady Danbury or her lady in waiting who got pregnant and had to leave. The true culprit that Queen Charlotte cannot actually challenge is the system itself, the cage it has built for her based on her position as queen, the powerlessness that it uses to bind her, and the loneliness that she's forced to accept. Hell, one could even say that this carries through as well for Francesca, John, and Michaela, because depending on how you choose to interpret their conflict, at the core of it, it's still a shifting of blame. We can either read it as Fran, who has spent all her life being the odd one out of her Bridgerton sibling, who's always desired quiet and solitude, and which is what drew her to John in the first place. This feeling that it's just the two of them against the vast silence of the universe, being upset that that seclusion, that silence that she's always loved about their relationship is now being intruded upon by John's more gregarious cousin. And so she erroneously shifts that blame onto Michaela, which is why she's so upset with her, because she isn't willing to confront her own fears and feelings that maybe, just maybe, what John desires is the happiness and high energy that her siblings have in spades, and she doesn't, but Michaela clearly has as well. Or we can read it also as the early stirrings of attraction, which Fran isn't willing to deal with or consider. So rather than face that, she instead blames Michaela for being insistently ever present in every corner of her life, even when she had made the active choice to put that distance between them and return to London with John. Whichever the case may be, Fran's story in the season is centered around her having to come to terms with what she's actually feeling and not continue to wrongly blame Michaela for it. It's interesting to me that we don't really see that shifting of blame occur with Benedict in the show. this season, though. In the books, Benedict is an absolute asshat when he discovers Sophie's true identity, and he blames her for not being forthright with him, which we are meant to read as him simply being pissed at himself for not actually recognizing her when she was beneath his nose all along. With the show, we get a slight bit of it, with Sophie admitting that she did blame Benedict a bit upon their first meeting because she had hoped he would recognize her and was upset that he didn't. It's mild, but it was her blaming him wrongfully for something he couldn't control. Although, when you really think about it, truly, the fact that Benedict could not tell that Sophie clearly has monolid eyes and instead focused on the shape of her lips when her eyes were a dead giveaway had me screaming. And this is an artist, you all. He drew her eyes so many times and couldn't see it. I'm sorry, but that boy deserves some blame in my book. But of course, these are just my thoughts. I would, as always, love to hear yours. Whether or not you agree with me, please share them in the comments. Like this video, however, if you've watched this far and enjoyed anything of what I had to say, share it so others might find my channel as well. Or you can check out my gaming or ASMR channels if they sound like something you might potentially possibly be interested in. I have them both linked in the description bar. I will see you on Monday with a new video. Until then, do remember, obsessing over the things you love, perfectly valid coping mechanism.